Okay, May 16th, my calendar has suddenly, of course,
2020.
just the wrong moment evaporated. May 16th, and it's lovely to have everybody here. We'll begin by checking in, and as we do so, will you mention your appointing a body? Eve.
Eve Eisenberg, and I'm appointed by the town.
Select Board.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we're off to, you can say we're a little rusty. Paul, good evening.
Good evening, Paul, Recreation Commission appointee.
Thank you. Nancy Nelson.
Nancy Nelson, Historical Commission appointee.
Thank you. Andrew Boardman.
Andrew Boardman, Planning Board appointee.
Thank you. John Kratzley. Oh, you're muted, John.
Okay, I'm back. I'm John Kratzley, Select Board appointee.
Thank you. And Burton?
Burton Flint, Select Board appointee.
And Diane Proctor, Select Board appointee. And we're going to have, and Ed is going to be joining us from the Housing Committee, but to replace Charles, but I don't see him yet on the call, but it would be lovely to have him. Let me begin by saying there was an article in the Concord Bridge featuring Giroux Park. And there have been some questions about, since they mentioned the CPC and funding. The Giroux Park was funded quite a long time ago. And so our responsibility for it is long since over. And really it's the Select Board, which needs to be paying attention to what's going on there. The original contracts were crafted by Stephen Crane and Kate Hodges, neither of whom is presently in our town. So I have urged the Select Board to take this up and to try to determine, you know, what's going on in terms of the funding and the completion of the Giroux project. But I hope and anticipate it will not reflect poorly on the CPC, as our responsibilities for it have long since been completed. Any other comments about that? I received a note from one of our members, Paul.
Yeah, the reason why I brought it up was not related to the past funding of the project, and it's largely spent. It's related to the present and the future, and specifically the Warner's Pond project. And Delia shared the alternatives analysis, which he's going to discuss at an upcoming meeting. And if you look at that alternatives analysis, and we have funded that project, whatever that turns out to be. Giroux is mentioned in there at least 50 times. And in fact, the recreational, if you look at that report, especially page 410, the recreational objectives of that project being Delia's project, which is probably going to be dam removal. I don't want to jump ahead, but whether it's dam removal or dredging, the recreational opportunity is centered on Giroux. And it's very clearly centered on Giroux. So my concern was that moving forward, the projects are indelibly linked together. So we need to be aware of that, because when we fund that project, we are going to be funding something which is dependent on Giroux being viable. That's why I brought that up, Diane. It didn't relate to the past, it related to the future, and it's a major objective in Delia's plans, yet to be nailed down, but Giroux is in there, and it's all over her report. And the beautiful drawings and renditions of what the pond is going to look like from Giroux, whether it's dredged or dam removal. So I wanted us to be aware of that it's not it's a present and future issue for us.
Thank you, Paul, so much. We appreciate that. Anne, do you want to add anything to this discussion?
I really don't have anything to add at this point.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you very much. Burton,
Diane, just one point, actually, and I Paul, I do not intend to contradict you. I read that column in the Concord Bridge, and it was eye-raising, and it happened to follow. I read it a few hours after I had just done a walking tour of Giroux Park, and was much chagrined by its current state. But I did note that in that column in the Concord Bridge, that it said that people should be concerned about, you know, I think it said that the recently approved $550,000 for the Giroux Warner's Pond project. And I actually think that that's a little bit of a mischaracterization. What I would suggest is that I was going to write a letter to the Concord Bridge to clarify that the $550,000 is specifically for to address the eutrophication issues at the pond, and the town cannot redirect that funding to cover any short gaps, lost funds, mess ups at the Giroux Park. So while I appreciate there's symbiosis between the projects because one borders the other, the pond obviously borders the park. I thought it was important to clarify and let people have second thoughts about the $550,000, which was voted for at the town meeting, that was going to be throwing more money after good money after bad at Giroux Park. So I'm going to be writing a letter to the bridge to that, and Diane, I'll share that with you as the chair, because I do mention in my letter that I'm on the CPC.
Good. Well, thank you so
Let me
much.
just
Mark, because I think
comment on
that
that.
clarification is important. I'm
Please,
sorry,
Paul.
Paul,
Yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point. The objectives of the Warner's Pond project, even from the get-go, were a combination of ecological restoration and recreational opportunities. That's always been clear, both of those. So it is not just ecological, it's recreation as well. And so where does the recreation come from? What is the source of that? That's what I'm saying. We have not funded a Warner's Pond Giroux project. But to the extent that the dam removal option is chosen, it will turn out to be close. There's a close connection, Bert. And but yeah, the objectives have always been twofold: ecological and recreation. So I just want to make.
Yeah, and in fact, I think originally the goal was, I mean, I remember the early conversations 6-7 years ago when we were looking at acquiring the land to return the historic swimming access from the Giroux lands. And then was definitely a focus on recreation at that point in time. And I was very eager for that. And then, of course, the town was gifted the swimming beach at White Pond, and everybody realized, well, there's a lot, there's fixing the eutrophication at Warner's Pond, and then there's making it swimmable. And that swimmable piece is a much bigger project. And now we've got a superb swimming beach at White Pond. It was my impression, and I'll go back and look at Delia's report talking about the recreation aspects, but that what we're talking, that the recreation opportunities at Warner Pond are limited to providing a very nice view shed from the park and canoeing from the existing canoe ramp.
That's right. And I think that
Let me just,
I have not tried to step into the pond myself, but my understanding is that stepping into the pond is a perilous adventure.
It is. Yeah.
That you're up.
We'll get stuck.
Yeah, you're up to your feet in muck and mire. Go
I
ahead.
want you to look at Delia's latest renditions. This dock here, the dock access now becomes the primary launching point for boat access from Giroux. It's not Commonwealth anymore. So to the extent that the dam is removed, Giroux becomes the prominent source of boating access. I'll kind of leave it at that. So take a close look. It's going to come back, and I think it's going to come up at her meeting. But so, you know, Diane, we can leave it at that. I just want everybody to be aware of that.
Thank you, Paul. Nancy?
No, I just think, yeah, thank you. I think the recreational aspects will still remain, but they may be different. They may be different.
They're going to be different. So,
Yeah.
so in any case, thank you, Paul, for that. I mean, what alarmed me actually about the letter. Very helpful for Paul Cohn to write it, and detail that was more than helpful. But what concerns me about it is that it seems to not differentiate between who the town manager was and how all that was managed originally. And it may have been an original article, but he was limited to certain numbers of words. And therefore, you know, a full flushing out of the discussion was probably unable to happen. But I would hate to see Carrie Fleur in any way associated with.
And is there confusion in town? Yes.
That's what I
Absolutely, and it's not going to be solved very quickly, but you know, that's part of it. And you were not funding a Giroux project, but there's confusion about moving forward. So, okay.
Yeah, you're wise to bring this up, and I think Burton's skillful hand will lead us to a greater clarity in town. So Burton, thank you so much for undertaking that. So that's that. Now we're next on our agenda is a public information session, and that really gives us a chance to hear from people who may be here requesting money of one kind or another. Anne and I received this evening, a couple of minutes before our meeting, a note from Liz Rust saying that she anticipates, and Anne, help me if I make sure I say this absolutely accurately. She anticipates that the CHDC will be applying next year, by September 6th, for a $1.5 million now development of the Assabet River Bluff houses. And she wants to split that between, in some way, between CPC and Keith Bergman's committee, and Keith is right here for the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So Keith, we're all going to be anticipating the arrival of that particular request, and Liz was in some haste and some thoughtfulness to alert us to this. Keith, do you have any comments?
Thanks, Diane. It's I think in this upcoming funding round, I'll make it a practice to attend CPC meetings just so I find out who's going to apply for housing projects, because sometimes they stop at you first, and me later and say, well, the CPC said it's all right. But I'm being very facetious there. We're working very closely with all the housing groups, and I would anticipate that the major expenses that will occur, we will find out about in joint discussions at the Concord Housing Roundtable. You know, that's the incubator, I think, for a lot of what's coming forward. So, yeah. So thanks.
And since my trusty calendar, which I always have right at hand, seems to have disappeared, can you remind us when that Concord, when the Housing Roundtable is? It's not on the 6th anymore. It's
no, the next Concord Housing Roundtable will be on Wednesday, June 7th, at 7 p.m. And it will focus on, it will have a speaker from the CHAPA, the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, which is one of the consultants. The other is MHP, Mass Housing Partnership, working with the town on MBTA communities zoning, which is I'd say the biggest non-financial strategy that we have in the housing production plan. So that'll be the focus, and I'll just say the other big thing that we will know then, in fact, if you want to set your watches, 12:01 a.m. Thursday, May 25th, the federal government will be releasing publicly 2020 U.S. Census household data, which then the DHCD then turns into our denominator for calculating 10% under Chapter 40B. So we will know publicly that day, you know, how many units have we fallen below 10%, and that will be important information for us to have.
And thanks. Leading up, and thank you, Keith. And leading up to that, on the 24th, there is a lobby day for Thrive, which is all has to do. You want to explain what that one is in Boston?
Well, yeah, there is. I'll put a plug in. It's the LOHA Coalition, the local option for housing affordability coalition that Concord and a dozen other communities that are seeking transfer fees for affordable housing. They're pushing a statewide local option bill that's been filed, and LOHA Lobby Day at the State House. Now they've rescheduled it. Now it's going to be on Tuesday, June 6th at 11 a.m. So that's the day before, and that's at the State House in person. And we're hoping that many of the housing groups here will here in Concord and other communities that are pitching for real estate transfer fees will be represented.
Oh, that's terrific. So that's moved to June 6th. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm glad to know that, and I'll take it off the calendar, which I have now exhumed under piles of paper. So thank you very much. And all of this, of course, is in our wheelhouse because of the affordable housing commitments that we have made and continue to shepherd. We have Melissa Softfield and Linda Miller here. We wonder if either of you is here to talk about any public information about forthcoming grants.
Speaking for myself, I'm Melissa. I'm not videoing myself, but no, I'm just here because you're closing out the Emerson flagpole, and I wanted to dot my I's and cross my T's.
You're fantastic, Melissa. Thank you. And Linda Miller.
Yes, I'm with the planning board. Andrew is our representative on the CPC, and I am just tuning in for general information and background.
Well, I wanted
Thank
to
you.
welcome you both and make certain that we attended to whatever needs you may have.
Thank you.
Our big job tonight is to read and look over the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust draft, which Keith and his committee have done a beautiful job of redlining. And so I'm going to ask Anne to pull it up, and I think we need to read through it very carefully, noting I'm sure we've all read it independently, but read through it very carefully and make certain that we don't have any questions. So
I think, this is Nancy. I think I should recuse myself because my husband is on the trust board.
okay, you can recuse yourself from the vote, but can you listen in on the discussion, Nancy, I think?
I will try, but I'm going to also try to access the HATS meeting.
Okay, so you will, but come back to us.
I'll come back. I'll come back. You might lose me. Yeah.
Okay. So I know it's tedious to read something aloud, but I think it's not unimportant because this is important. The community. Oh, and I wondered one more thing. I'm sorry. Stuart Saganor sent us a note. I presume, did you all receive it? Could you speak up verbally, so I know?
Yes.
Good. Asking us to contact our state senator, which I immediately did because of the CPC funding. If you've been following what's going on in the State House, they're given taxes, a diminution in taxes that they anticipated. The budgets are being squeezed dramatically right now in the State House. And talking with Mike Barrett 2 months ago, there was a very different mood than there was talking to Mike Barrett a week ago. State funding is right now a concern. So Stuart urged us, and if you didn't, and you have a chance, it would be great for you to send a note off to Mike Barrett urging him to support the CPC. So Community Preservation Act, Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, this grant agreement made this day of June, and it'll be May, I guess, 2023. By and between the town of Concord Municipal Corporation, duly organized under the laws of Massachusetts and having its usual place of business at 22 Monument Square, Concord Town, and the town of Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust established pursuant to chapter blump, 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 and under declaration of trust recorded with the Middlesex County Registry of Deeds in book 79188, page 390, herein after the trust having its usual place of business at 22 Monument Square, Massachusetts, Concord, Massachusetts.
Diane, can I ask who these edits were made by whom that we're looking at, these red lines?
These edits were made by Keith Bergman and the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing.
It's probably worth mentioning that the base document is the template that the Community Preservation Coalition provided, that provides to CPCs who have funding with local municipal affordable housing trusts. And if I, it might help if I just summarized what.
That would be terrific. I didn't want to ask you to have to do that, but it'd be wonderful.
No,
Please.
I'm happy to do it because the trust, overall, the trust is fine with the boilerplate, all the conditions and so forth that are contained in this template, that it's a well thought out document. It's been used lots of places, and that's fine by us. What we wanted to call to the CPC's attention, though, is that in a couple of basic ways, the template would require edit in order to fit into our situation here. First, that the template that the coalition uses really is where the CPC is funding a particular project for the trust, and in fact, where there's a specific application that's been submitted for that specific project. If we, for example, we're going to say we need, we know we're going to need $3 million for Junction Village at some point, so we're going to apply for Junction Village. And when Junction Village is ready, then we will be able to act quickly on it whenever that happens. That's not the situation here. It's on the trust's own motion. Back in January, we were for which we're grateful. We were seeking to make sure that the funds that had been appropriated by prior town meetings for another affordable housing project, specifically Christopher Heights at Junction Village, that it might make sense to have those funds. In fact, town meeting appropriated all of the funds, over $2 million between this article and the one that followed from the select board, so that those funds, which had initially been allocated for Christopher Heights, is still available for affordable housing when there's a specific application that comes forward, and that the trust could act quickly at that time. And so rather than identify a specific project, what the article that you submitted says is that the funds would be expended under the direction of the trust for the purpose of assisting with the development of affordable community housing, period, and didn't specify a particular project. So that's one thing. And the second is that, at least on the format, that the coalition template proposes that the select board be the signatory on behalf of the town, but the practice in Concord appears to be, and your standard contractual grant agreement as the town manager, not the select board being the signatory. That's I'd say ultimately whatever the town determines is the proper signatory, is the right one, but we just wanted to flag that. And lastly, while we have not offered specific language, if anyone's in any doubt about what the money would be used for, basically it'll be used to carry out the housing strategies and the housing production plan that was just adopted. We know what that document looks like. If it makes any of us feel more comfortable about what the funds might be used for, it's going to be used on a project, one of the many projects that are enumerated in that policy document. So anyway, that's sort of where we came from here, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you. And since we've all read the document, do people have, and since you've summarized it so beautifully, Keith, do people have questions about the document? And would you like to refer us, Keith, to any particular page where you think specific emendations have taken place?
Diane?
Yes, we can
Burton.
both have. So John Burton, John, you want to
Please.
Same question. I wanted to see the section where the general language is that replaces the language that would have gone to a specific project.
Yes.
So you could, let's see, I'm going to look at my hard copy because it's easier for me to see under the
Section
lamp.
3, I think.
Yeah, it's what I think too.
John, it describes the general purpose. It just defines the work and it says the work consists of assisting with the development of affordable community housing as described in Article 28 of the April 30th, 2023 annual town meeting.
Which gives the specificity, which is also a broad one, but the specificity that we were looking for the last time, John.
Right.
Yeah, and that's, the Article 28 is just the transfer of the Christopher Heights money, correct?
Exactly right.
Okay,
It specifies that purpose that would be funded. I went back and that's essentially verbatim from what what the funding was reappropriated for.
Okay.
Right. And if I could, the shorthand in numbered paragraph 1, where it refers to contract documents, it refers to a grant application, which there isn't one. And in a normal grant agreement, that application would be quite specific about the project that was being approved. And so the contract documents consists entirely of the grant agreement itself and not also to an application approved by the committee.
Yeah,
And it-
although I'm sorry, the language does say concerning the application. I wonder.
Oh, okay.
Did you-
Yeah, point well taken. Looks like another strikeout in paragraph 1.
Yeah. I don't think you meant to leave it there.
We did
That-
not.
No.
No.
Should be just of this grant agreement, right?
Yeah, we could probably simple down one since there's no documents that are incorporated by reference into this agreement. So this contract, right?
Yeah.
The contract
Right.
document is the grant agreement.
Right. It could be, the contract documents constitute the entire grant agreement, period.
Period.
Strike the balance. Thank you for catching that.
Diane, I've got 2 comments.
Go ahead.
One, well, actually, I'll say 3. But I think before we had some discussion
Well,
around
Burton.
whether we want to have purpose, a specific purpose more described, or the suggestion from the trust that it's the purpose be talk about like that it be spent in accordance with the housing production plan. I mean, I think we should stick with the bylaw. Excuse me, the bylaw. The scope of what was approved at town meeting, which is the language that's right here, assisting with the development of affordable housing, because that's what was approved by the town, and we had that discussion before, and when we were drafting the article, and came out with that general purpose. That my 2 comments, one of which I made back at that time, was the 10% of funds that can be used for expenses, and that's in 3C.
Right.
I know the trust may incur, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what administration and operation of the trust expenses look like. 10% of a lot of money, it seems to me like a pretty large amount. And I'm sure that number's in there because it's in the template, but I guess I'd like to ask what those expenses may look like. The other thing was the scope of the project is that the funds would be spent within 3 years. That's what the grant agreement says. I think that's probably template language as well, because these CPC grants generally last 3 years. I think it talks about that the town can terminate the agreement. I think that we should make clear that the work needs to be completed in 3 years. And if it's not, then the trust would need to, in other words, the money would need to be spent within 3 years. And if it's not, then the trust would be coming back to the CPC to ask for an extension of this agreement. And the reason for that is because after this money sat there for Junction Village for so long, I'd like to make sure it gets spent and in due course and soon.
Burton, that's so wise. We've watched that, and in language that I used at the town meeting, that we've watched money sit fallow, and that's not how we intend for it to be used. John, you have your hand up.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
all set.
Now, Burton, were those 3 points, or were those? Or do you
Those
have
were my 3 points. One, let's keep the purpose broad because that's what was approved at town meeting. We already hashed that out before town meeting. The second was I'd like to know about why 10% of funds. Do we need to be spending any of this money on administration and operation of the trust? And then the final point being the work, it already says that it'll be completed within 3 years, but I think that in the language around termination of the grant agreement, that the grant agreement will terminate in 3 years as the work should be completed, unless if the work's not completed, the trust comes back for an extension. Which I could imagine, let's say they partially funded a project that was under construction. Of course, the CPC would grant the extension, but if the funding was sitting there unspent because the trust was stuck in another waltz with a Grantham group type of situation, that we'd want to probably have another bite at the apple.
Those are, if I could, Diane, those are great points. It's not that we have a purpose for the 10%, but we left it in because it was in the template, but we don't need it. So we're happy to take it out, because if we felt that we needed administrative funds for it, there's no need to tie up the CPC dollars for that there would be, we have another $1 million in an article from the select board. And actually, I think it would be a high bar for us to spend any of this money on administration. I'm trying as best I can to get something for nothing from the town administration. And we'll be meeting with the town manager again soon about that. So
Keith, who is responsible for the trust legal fees? And for example, preparing contract documents with an entity that you agree to fund.
The town's budget pays for
really?
And if there were, I'd have to look back though to see for sure what legal expenses might have been charged for closing costs and so on for the funds that we gave CHDC $50,000 expense, pre-acquisition expenses, and some of those may have been for town council compared to their own council. I'd have to look at that. But other times when we've asked for town council to review documents, we've not received a bill. It's been paid for by the towns. I mean, we're a town entity, and it's been paid for out of the town's legal budget. On the second matter of extent, so happy to take out under paragraph 3,
item C.
Happy to take that out, and also happy to have the language about, and I'm looking for the paragraph that it's in, about extending, if we don't spend the money in 3 years, to come and ask for an extension.
Yes.
Yeah,
Item 2.
I would look at section 12 and I would reword that to say something along the line of that the grant agreement shall terminate upon the earlier of the trust's final disbursement of project funds and the delivery ... or 3 years from the date of this grant agreement. But that it can be, let's see, there was some extension language. Well, anyways, that's the general idea.
Yeah, that's a general idea, and believe me, that is something that I would defer to Mina Makarios to write the right way for us mutually.
Okay, well, as long as we have careful notes to indicate what we are suggesting, because I think we're going to need to vote on this document. So let's just make sure we have Anne, do we have the exact language that you're going to need?
It hasn't been reviewed by Mina yet, so I think you should try to get it as close as you can to what you want, and then submit it to him, and then there will be changes.
Okay, so are we relying on Keith to refine that language, or should we do it right now?
Diane, if you'd like, I can take a crack at it and send it to you to be, or to Anne to be shared with the board. Or I find drafting in real time by committee can sometimes be a little bit of a a nightmare. It's actually what I do most of the day, all day long. So it's,
Well,
it
what
can
we
be-
don't need is a camel. We'd like a nice smooth horse. So that would be, this would be great. Thank you, Burton, for agreeing to do this, and I presume collaborating with Keith. Anne, did you want to add something?
Yes, it's just sort of a question by someone who knows very, very little about affordable housing. But I was wondering, I know that there are two different definitions. There's the definition to meet your 10% for the town, and then the CPC definition is a little more broad. So I'm not sure if you want to be more specific about the definition of affordable housing. Item number 3.
If I could, I think we're using the definition of community housing that's in the Community Preservation Act, which is up to 100% of AMI. That, you know, it gets back to what are we likely to spend it on? We're likely to spend it on things that count on the SHI, on the subsidized housing inventory, which is up to 80% of AMI. But this specifically in the town meeting vote and all is specifically for affordable community housing, which the statute, the CPA statute does define as up to 100% of AMI.
Does that seem satisfactory to you, Anne?
I'm not part of the committee. It's just sort of a public question from
This is,
someone who's.
I was going to ask Keith, could you clarify? So it sounds like you're saying the CPA has one definition of community housing, which has an affordability element to it, presumably.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the SHI definition.
Right. That's right. That in order for units to get counted on the subsidized housing inventory,
Which
if
is what
they-
SHI is. If we could
Yeah,
not use
SHI.
acronyms until after we've already
Oh.
said. the whole thing is
Yeah,
pretty-
that in order for units to get counted on the subsidized housing inventory, if they are ownership units, then they must be at 80% of area mean income. If they are rental units, then 25% of the total number of rental units have to count at 80%, and the balance can count at anything higher. And that's just how you can count SHI units. This agreement, though, is specifically for community housing, which is up to and not to exceed 100% of AMI.
This presents a little bit of a conundrum because I think probably this committee was thinking about funding affordable housing that would help preserve in part, would go towards preservation of that 10% affordable amount in town, which is the SHI number, or derived from that's the part of the calculation there. Our article at town meeting said affordable housing.
Right.
It wasn't more
specify.
specific about that.
It's I'd say it's whatever it means is a question for probably Stuart and then for Mina, and whatever it means is what we should write. We should be
Well,
of a common
there's a-
understanding. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and maybe Mina could guide us. I mean, the Article 28, Diane said affordable community housing.
I know.
That to me sounds like they're talking about that it needs to qualify under the CPA. And that's
was my
probably I'm gonna get
Yeah.
right. No, it would be excellent, I guess. And I think that's what we got approved. I guess, Keith, it would be great if it was if it was a SHI.
If it
right?
were, yeah, and you know, we have no objection to, I mean, we're focused on spending 80, at 80% of AMI, so it can get counted. And if that was your intent, I mean, I guess I was reading into it just what the word said with no definitions. But if that's your intent, let's make sure that Stuart's okay with that there doesn't violate some unwritten law of the way CPC's work, and Mina's okay with it. We're fine with a limit to 80% of AMI. We're fine. The
Okay.
trust.
I think that Burton reflects the intention of our committee perfectly. I mean, we always think of the affordable housing that we are to which we are contributing as contributing to the SHI. Eve.
I was just going to say, maybe we could put these definitions in the whereases in the beginning. I don't really know much about writing these things, but I do think Anne's right. It's important to say what affordable housing is and what community housing means in this document, and to be specific that we are really aiming for the affordable housing, which would be accounted in the SHI. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Eve. No, that's beautifully put, and it's important. Do we have any other comments about this document? Our thoughts? John, your hand is raised again.
Yes, I wanted to ask Keith, 3D and E. Are you comfortable with those restrictions?
And could you list? Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, because the law says so. Because the CPA law says that we can't spend funds to rehabilitate existing units.
This is troublesome to me, Keith, and I have a note at the end that I wanted to ask, because that's what we just gave money for. The CPC gave money for the rehabilitation of the house, the duplex that's.
Well, yes, but those are not community housing units. They're just housing units.
They're just housing units. Okay, then.
So I think what
becomes even more critical, doesn't it?
Yeah, and again, it's probably Stuart probably has an SOP or FAQ or something that explains that difference, but relying on, it's as consistent with the provisions of the CPA statute, if we're bound by that law, whatever it says. And so
John, you want to refine your comment about item E?
The same question, is 44B the Community Preservation Act? Or is it?
yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So
Yeah,
these are.
and we are whenever possible to reuse existing buildings, and sometimes it's not possible.
Does that address your concern, John, or your question?
If it's required by the statute and it's all framed by the word community housing, then that I understand.
Okay, well, Stuart, the Stuart that has been referred to often as Stuart Saganor, and he is the administrator of the CPA funds and the CPA Act on a state level. And so that is the person to whom we have been often referring. And he is, as is Keith, actually, in truth, a maven on all of this and knows a great deal about the nature of these arrangements.
Can you drop the page a little bit more?
And could you move the page down a little bit for us? And what in there, John?
I'm just looking at it.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like they're all definitions that are forced on us by 44B, different sections of 44B.
Yes.
If I understand Keith correctly.
Yes. Yeah. That's right.
And John, I think my question would be, can we go one bit further? As long as if the housing that the trust builds falls within all those definitions, can we also make sure it qualifies for the SHI for the subsidized housing inventory?
So does that mean, Burton, you need something as an option to the words community housing? You need to expand the language?
Well, so I don't want to overstep the bounds of the article that approved it, but the article that approved the fund said affordable community housing. And it looks like the CPA has a defined term, community housing, or that's the term as it's used in the statute. I'm going to go look and read that section of the Mass General Laws, John. But what I'm wondering is, and because it sounds like Keith is perfectly amenable to it, is whether we could say that it's our intent that the funds be used for housing that also qualifies for the subsidized housing inventory.
Yeah,
That's
it's
worth,
the,
yeah.
yeah, we're in this case, and perhaps uniquely, the term community housing, which is the business that CPCs are in, is modified in this article by the word affordable. And does that word affordable, which has a definition somewhere, I mean, frankly, there are a lot of different definitions out there.
There are.
And there's another section of law that says it's 120%. But for purposes of the SHI, it's 80%, as we talked about. I think this conversation has been great because I think we're really close to finalizing an agreement, but there are some issues that, you'll want to get, legal advice on, and to just make sure that it's in final form, and whatever that turns out to be, we'll be fine with the trust.
I think that this suggests that we should not try to vote on this tonight, but we should exercise the emendations to it and then bring it back to the committee the next time we meet. And you've taken it back to your committee, Keith, when do you next meet, Keith?
We next meet on June 13th.
June 13th. Oh, okay. And I think, when do we next meet? I thought we met on June 13th.
Yeah, we're meeting at 5 o'clock that
Okay.
day. You might be meeting at
Yes,
7.
I've got it right here, Concord House. Yeah, at 5 o'clock.
So that timetable works fine. It doesn't delay us at all.
So let's do that today. And what I can do is I can make some edits here, and share them with Keith, and then I can work with you to see if it needs to review by town council, and then we could have that with plenty of time to share before both of those meetings, and we'll go in rapid succession.
And the community has got capital C and small c, so just another edit to watch for.
That was one of my comments, John. Thank you. And that's on the 20th of June, not the 13th. So we will be meeting considerably after you meet, not moments.
Okay, well, that's, yeah, that works out fine. We'll have a chance the committee will have a chance to, the trust will have a chance to approve that form that's worked out, and then you'll be all set for your meeting on the 20th.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time tonight, and thanks so much for thinking of us in the first place, of what do we do with this leftover $1,044,000. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Keith, it has been a pleasure, as you know, for all of us to be working hand in glove with the trust and with housing and enterprises in the town, because they are so important to all of us. So we will await the 1201 report.
Very good. Yeah, we'll have, I don't think it'll be a cause to celebrate. I think
No.
I'd love to be wrong, but I think more likely it's going to be the starting signal for the race to unfriendly 40Bs showing up at the Zoning Board of Appeals. So
I think you are probably absolutely correct. Thank you very much.
okay, thanks so much. Good night. Good night, then.
Good
Take
night.
care. Thank you.
Now, Anne has been busy with all sorts of work recovering funds for us. And this is always much to be appreciated. And if you could, if we could go over, I think we have it on our agenda, so I don't think we need to put it up on our screen. Oh, yes, we'll put it up on the screen. So Anne, will you take us through each one of these and explicate what happened with each one of them for us?
I can try. Let's see, I just reviewed the documents that that were submitted, the final reports, the the expenditure reports. I checked in with the project managers on each project, and it turns out that 3 of the projects had funds left over, and each project manager was okay with returning the funds back to CPC and said that the project was indeed completed. That includes the Emerson Field flagpole, Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and a second Bruce Freeman Rail Trail grant. So that's about $10,000 that goes back to the CPC. And then with the other 5, there was no money remaining.
Right. Thank you so much. And with the money that we recovered earlier, thanks to your assiduous following of each of these projects, we will have some bonus money that we will need next year, given what the projections are for what the CPC funding would be in the coming years. So Anne, thank you so much. And at the next meeting, I think having an aggregate sum of all of the monies we've recovered would be a good idea to be able to report to the public. Melissa, how does that work for you? How did this work for you in terms of the closing out of the Emerson flagpole project?
Thank you. Well, perfect, because early on, Aaron McCloskey of Public Works called me up and said, do you want me to take this over? So I have Public Works to thank for shepherding the whole project. And the only question I have, and I don't know whether they said anything to you, there was a time capsule at the base of the flagpole. Did they say anything to you folks, or did they ever reported anything to you?
No, we knew that was happening, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I hope that I think I'm sure they would have told the world if they'd open it up. So it's still there.
Okay.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad there was money left over. I always like to be cheap and tidy.
Thank you.
Diane, if I may comment, just looking at that number and knowing that the original appropriation was what, like $22,000 or something?
Cheryl, I'll show you.
It was in the
I don't think
20s.
it was that high.
We don't need to do the math, but because I think just roughly speaking, that's probably the highest percentage of returned funds from any project, certainly that I'm aware of. And that's to be celebrated.
I want an asterisk by my name. Thank you.
Well, Melissa, have you heard of the Warner's Pond project?
Oh, God.
Oh, Burton, that was a nasty blow.
Well, I mean, maybe she could get that one.
Well, thank you. I'm cheap, but I'm not stupid.
Okay, thank you so much, both Melissa, for attending and for the management of all of that. Paul. You're muted, Paul, so we can't hear you.
I have a question. I hope it's not out of order, but in terms of future funding and process, I think you mentioned it, Diane, at town meeting. If the Warner's Pond project recommended by Delia turns out to be something other than dredging, will she have to reapply under a different project? I thought there was some discussion along those lines, but I wasn't sure what the procedure might be.
Thank you so much for asking, Paul. What she'll have to do is to ask for a reappropriation of those funds for whatever purpose is now in hand. I mean, we don't know yet. I mean, it could be a partial dredging and then something, until that's determined, but it will require that in order for them to have, in order for the NRC to have access to that funding we've already given them.
So maybe not an application, but approval by the CPC.
It will be more like a kind of a transfer the way we've done it, the way we did it this year, only we don't really need the 2 steps we used this year, which was proved to be cumbersome and confusing for people at best. It will just be that those funds will be reverted to back to the Natural Resources Commission in the form of. So
you mean I can't look forward to 3 more warrant articles?
No, I mean, it was crazy. And we thought we were supposed to do that, but happily we read the fine print and discovered we didn't have to do it that way. So John, your hand is still up. Do you have a question? No? Okay.
Nope.
Oh, good. Okay, wonderful. And now committee membership. Nancy, are we going to still be able to enjoy your presence on this committee?
Yes, my term was extended for another term by the select board.
That is so fantastic. And Andrew, I know,
Actually, I probably misspoke on that. And it was extended for the Historical Commission, and I'm the Historical Commission rep, to be more precise.
fantastic. Well, that's wonderful news for the committee. And Andrew, you're the representative from the planning board. Has that been determined yet, or are you still?
I don't know definitively. I don't think anyone's lining up to take it though, so likely I would.
Thank you. Okay, and Linda's here to participate in this. Look, we want to elect officers for next year, and Burton has been the clerk, and I would like to recommend that he become the chair of the committee next year. So I can't nominate because I'm the chair. Can somebody else? Would somebody else be?
Can I nominate Burton Flint to be chair
I'll second.
of CPC?
Thank you.
Burton, do you accept the nomination?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much, both of you.
Good. Okay. So all in favor, we don't need a roll call vote on this. John?
Yes,
Myself, yes. Paul?
Yes.
Eve?
Yes.
Nancy?
Aye.
Aye. Andrew?
Yes.
And Burton, yourself?
Yes. Thanks.
You have to vote for yourself. That's
I
fantastic.
guess so. I just do as I'm told.
And so it is unanimous, and I do so declare.
If you could be the tiebreaker.
Clarification. Was,
I'm sorry?
was Burton clerk or was he vice chair? I forgot what we
Vice
voted last.
chair. I'm sorry, vice chair. And then we need to determine treasurer. And Paul, you have gallantly played that role this year. Would somebody like to nominate either Paul to continue in that role or for somebody else to be the treasurer? What do we think?
I'll
John?
nominate Paul to continue as treasurer.
Do I
I'll
hear? A
second that.
Thank you. Paul, do you accept that nomination?
I accept it. It's not the heaviest lift because I have great support from Ann and others in planning. So yes, I'll accept.
Okay, all in favor? John?
Yes,
Aye. John, Paul, yourself? Aye.
Aye.
Eve?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Burton?
Yes.
And Andrew?
Yes.
Thank you. And then we need a vice chair. Someone who can work on all of this. And would somebody please make a nomination for vice chair?
A clarification before you do, does vice chair somewhat automatically move into the chair role?
If they're available and if everything works out. I was never the vice chair, but I can be the chair.
no, the vice chair before you declined to continue.
That's right.
I'm having a little trouble remembering his name, but
Yeah, what that happened twice to me. So yes, I say this with great humor and great appreciation for the support of this committee, because I was certainly not expecting that the first year. I think I hope we nominate Eve, but do I hear a nomination?
yeah, I'll nominate Eve. I was just about to do it.
Oh, thank you, John. And do I hear a second?
I second.
Terrific. Eve, would you accept that?
I have a senior in high school next year. So, and I also just re-upped for a 5-year term with this committee.
Right.
And so I'm going to say no, and that I would be like I'm very just astonished that you would, I'm so thankful that you think that I could do that. But maybe somebody who's had more time on the committee could take a year.
John, would you be willing to be vice chair?
My memory is there's not a lot to do. You have to sometimes go to that Wednesday monthly meeting
Chair's breakfast.
when the chair can't make it.
Well,
I'm trying to
Burton, if you think that it's something that I could handle, being very new on the committee, to be vice chair seems like a lot, but to me, but what do I know?
Well, I would.
Go ahead.
My experience has been that Diane does everything.
Yeah.
but
Well, I love that.
So I will say, compared to roles I've had on other committees, a vice chair position is pretty easy, and I wouldn't say it is a materially significant more amount of work than being just a member of the committee. I think there's a big difference between being vice chair and but when becoming chair and doing all the work that Diane has been doing.
So what we're saying is
Eve,
it's
I'm
not
sorry, Eve,
automatically assumed that the vice chair becomes chair. That's
Chair.
the term.
Right.
Okay,
It
okay.
usually is that way. And if Eve, when after her son graduates and is off and running, feels that she can take on the chairmanship, that will be wonderful. And if she can't, then we'll regroup and figure out what comes next. Okay?
so I
Okay.
nominate Eve again.
Okay. And do I
I
hear a second?
accept.
Yay. Okay. Now let's see. All in favor, John.
Yes,
I say aye. Paul,
Aye.
Eve.
Yes.
Yay. Come on, big smile, big smile. Nancy,
I,
Andrew.
Yes.
Yes, Burton.
Yes.
Terrific. Isn't this wonderful? Okay.
By the way, I have 3 daughters. I have no sons.
Oh, I thought you said your son graduated.
No.
That was a misstep on.
Oh,
I just want to set the record straight. There's a lot of daughters over here.
three daughters, wow. How old are
Eve,
they?
the one job I mentioned, if Burton can't go to these monthly meetings of all the committees in town, it's the most fascinating opportunity to learn
That's-
everything that's
that's
going
right.
on in the town.
I don't, my presidency is over. Diane and I were talking this year, which is great. I've been president of the National Charity League, which is a 250 mother and daughter person organization here in Concord. And thank God that that's over. It's been lovely, but that's enough. And I wasn't really expecting to take another large role right away. But I'm happy to go to as many meetings as I can make it. I need to be, as you all know, when you have an upcoming senior, that you just need to be available for them as they're applying to colleges and moving on with their next steps. I want to be available to my daughter. So that's my situation. I have an 8th grader as well and a freshman in college.
Whoa.
So you've been through it and you know what it takes.
Yes. But
Okay.
I'm happy to toddle after Burton for a year.
Okay, well, this is exciting and thank you so much. And thank you all for the support you've given me these last 2 years. We need to approve the minutes of December 6th and February 21st.
But before you do, I'd like to just note, have the committee note appreciation to Diane for the job she's done over two years, right? And
Yes.
you decided you were going to jump in and do this 2 years in a row. I think you've done a great job, and you are just a natural leader and a calm leader to calm people like squeaky wheels like me down all the time. So that's we really appreciate it.
Thank
Oh,
you,
thank-
Diane.
Thank you very
Here,
much.
here.
Okay.
And Diane, you're badly needed to get us to 220 to 250.
250. John. That's another whole story.
I know, but stick with it, please.
So December 6th, the minutes of December 6th. I saw no changes to be recommended. And we don't have our wonderful Grimwood here, who always finds every mistake. There were when Sarah is traveling right now and coming back to Concord. So may I hear, well, we can do both minutes at the same time. What about the 21st, February 21st minutes?
Okay.
Again, I found, oh, Nancy, you found a mistake?
No, I was going to move to accept both sets of minutes.
Would you do that, please?
December 6th, 2022 and February 21st, 2023.
You move to
Second.
accept those.
Accept both.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second,
Terrific. Let's have a vote. John?
Yes,
I am yes. Paul?
aye.
Andrew?
Yes.
Burton?
Yes.
Eve?
Yes.
And Nancy?
I,
And it is unanimous, and I get to say that wonderful phrase, so Concordian, I do so declare. So before we adjourn, I want to turn to Linda, who's very patiently been on the phone. And Anne has something to say, but Linda Escobedo, how are we doing?
Can you
Linda?
hear me?
Yes, we can.
yes, yes.
Wonderful. You're doing terrifically. I want to comment on a couple things, and one is thanks to everyone who stepped up, and I want to echo the praise that was given to Diane for her leadership for the last 2 years. It's been terrific. There was an interesting conversation about the agreement, and I know it's in good hands because Burton is going to look at that again. But I think you'll find that in the statute, it talks about up to 100% for community housing. So I think leaving that definition will help accomplish everybody's intent based on what I heard in that conversation. So that's one comment I'd like to make. And the second comment I would make is that some of you may remember that a couple years ago, let me say this first, there's a very specific definition of preservation when it comes to community housing in a statute. And a couple years ago, the CPC committee ran into this with a request from the Concord Housing Authority, and the legal counsel determined that it did not meet that specific definition. And in summary, what that really refers to is that preservation has a very different meaning than historical preservation. And it usually talks about structural work that is absolutely necessary to protect the shell of the structure,
Well,
as opposed to what we think of renovation or other kinds of work that some people would refer to as preservation, but really falls more in the category of rehabilitation. So I just want to remind everybody about that legal ruling that we had a couple years ago, and also that very specific definition. And otherwise, as always, a fascinating discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, so much. I mean, that ended up playing a role in many of the projects that we undertook. Nancy?
I'd just like to reinforce what Linda said, that I think this committee, among other town committees, need to be more familiar with the Secretary of the Interior standards for preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction. And it would be great if all the committees actually spoke the same language on that, because CPC is required to ensure the adherence to the Secretary's standards.
Thank you very much. And maybe, Burton, sometime this summer, before we're all gathering again, Linda could, and Nancy could lead us through a discussion, a very detailed discussion of that portion of the law, and help us to familiarize ourselves with the language so that we use it more accurately as we go forward. Nancy, would you take on?
Yes, that would be great. There's also a one-pager that's really gets you right to the heart of the matter without getting too far into the weeds.
Fantastic. Well, I found that once myself.
And Ann Clifford is another resource on this, by the way, and her hands up.
Yeah. And you have the final word?
Right, so this actually doesn't relate to, the Secretary of the Interior standards, but I don't think you voted on the closeout. On the slate of closeouts. I can bring up the list again.
The slate of close. Oh, we didn't vote on it. Oh my
No, I
gosh.
don't think you did.
Okay. Okay. I didn't think we needed to vote on it, Anne. I mean,
we did on a previous batch.
did we? I thought we just accepted it. Okay, may I hear a motion? Okay, may I hear a motion to accept the closeouts, please?
I motion to accept the closeouts.
Thank you. Do I hear?
Second.
Thank you. Paul,
Aye.
Steve,
Yes.
Burton,
Yes.
Nancy,
Aye.
John,
Yes.
Nancy. I mean,
Aye.
Paul.
I'll go twice.
Paul.
I'll vote twice. Yes, yeah.
I can't. I'm sorry, my screen's not working well. John, aye.
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
And I do as well. Oh, and I get to say that one last time. It's unanimous, and I do so declare. Okay. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. And we'll see you all in a month. Okay.
Thanks,
June
Diane.
20. June 20.
June 20. Okay, bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.